Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel Tech Chat. Today I'm going to talk about a very important topic. So this is about private IP addresses and public IP addresses. Okay guys, we talk about IP addresses in our network video series, and also now I'm going to talk about private IPs and public IPs. So this is another way to categorize IP address. So before going to talk about private IP address and public IP address, let's have a look on this network diagram. So here you can see there are two companies, company A and company B. Guys, on my left hand side you can see the company A, and I have mentioned this is private network for company A. On right hand side you can see company B, and I have mentioned it as private network for company B. So guys, in company A, you can see that there are two computers connected with the switch. So this symbol gives for the switch, and then it connects with the router. So these four devices are controlled by company A. So in this kind of a network we call private network, because the all devices are on their control and within their company. So this kind of network we call as a private network. Okay guys, then these two computers connect with switch, then switch connect to the router. So this router connect to the router in the internet. So it means that the private network is reachable to internet, and we call internet as the public network. So guys, always the internet is the public network. So if you have your own computer connected to the router, so if you are reaching the internet, so always the internet is the public network, because it's not in your control. If you are trying to reach the facebook.com, so it's the internet. It means facebook.com is within the public network. So because you can't control it, but you can control your network devices. You can have access to the your PC, your switch, your routers. So it means that's your private network. So I think guys, you got an idea about private network and public network. So always internet is the public network. So your own devices and interconnected network we call private network. Okay, please have a look on this diagram also. So this is a diagram for a home network. So we have our computers and our mobile phone connected with the Wi-Fi router. So Wi-Fi router connect with the internet. Guys, so as I mentioned earlier, so your computers, mobiles and router within your control. It is within your home network. So that's your private network. But when you reach the internet, so you have to, if you let's say from your computer, so you have IP address of 192.168.0.143. You are trying to reach the facebook.com. So your first contact point, your first hop is router. So then router read the facebook.com. So it means the router is responsible to read the internet. It means that your internet service provider is responsible to read the internet. So guys, it means that after the router you have the public network, because you are not visible that network and you don't have control on that network. So your internet service provider will make the internet access for you. So that's how the private network and public network separate. So this example using the Wi-Fi router and connected device. So then how can we identify private network and public network? Guys, on that situation, private IP address and public IP address help us to identify private network and public network. Guys, as you notify here, so private network is in our control. So we can control IP address of the private network, but we can't control the IP address of public network. And one thing to mention here that a private network has specific IP address ranges. So always you can use private IP address within a set of IP address range. If you notice on this table, so in this table you can see there are three ranges. So within these ranges only we can use private IP address. So if you are going to start organization, so you can give IP address to your private network devices using only these IP address. It means this is a rule. So guys, if you are connected with internet, you can't use this IP address. This is only for your private network. So if you have an organization and within your company, you need to communicate with your computers, so then you have to use these private IP address. So private IP address help us to reach the other devices within our own private network. So if we have a company, so we have 10 employees and each employees have 10 computers. So we can allocate 10 IP address from this IP address range, one of range we select, then we can reach each computers. So that's a private network. So guys, if you have organization, you can use these IP address ranges to give the IP address for your network devices within your private network. So then what is meant by public IP address? If you are going to read the internet, you have to use the public IP address. So that's the meaning of a public IP address. Then, if you are going to reach a internet, you must have a public IP address. It means that you can't use private IP address. It means that guys, you can any organization, if any organization is using one of a public IP address, the other company, any other company can't use that same public IP address because public IP address is reachable to everyone. So any company has a single public IP address, any other company within the world unable to use that public IP address. Then you may have a question, so who is given this public IP address? Don't worry guys, in future videos I will talk about this topic. Who is giving this public IP address? So how can we have a public IP address? Don't worry guys about that one. Okay, so it means that if there are two organizations within two countries, can they use same private IP address? Yes, guys, because these private IP addresses are not open to the public network. So these private IP addresses are used to uh, control their devices within their organization. So it means that same private IP address can use for any other organization. So it's not a big problem. It's not a problem because the private IP address are not reachable to internet. So if we are going to read the internet, we must have a public IP address. So I will go back to my diagram, which is we are using a router, and here you can see my computers are connected to the router and we are going to read the internet. So here, as I mentioned also, router and computers are within the private network. So then you can see after the router, you can see IP address. This is a public IP address, and this public IP address provided by our internet service provider. Then we read the internet. So it means that guys, you must have a public IP address to read the internet. So come again to this table. So there are three IP address spaces for the private IP private networks. So the first one from 10.0.0 to 10.255.255.255. So you can use any IP address within this range to for a private IP as a private IP address. Okay, so and also 172.16.0.0 to 172.31.255.255 is another range for private IP addresses, and third is range is 192.168.0.0 to 192.168.255.255. It means that if you see any IP address within these ranges, it means that's a private IP address. So what are the public IP address? You know guys, IP address is a 32-bit address, and if we notice that one in the total decimal notation, the first one is 0.0.0.0. So last one is 255, 255, 255, 255. So it means you can use within that range. It means that if you have any other IP, which is not within these IP ranges, that IP is a public IP address. So that's the simple idea about the public IP address. So let's have a look on few questions. Select the public IPs and private IP. Okay, this is not a big problem. So have a look on the first one, 192.168.172.121. Please come back to the my table. So in the third row, you can see 192.168.020 192.168.255.255 range for private IP addresses. So if you come here, so you can see that this IP address is within the range of 192.168.002 192.168.255.255. So this is a private IP address. So come to the next one. That IP address is 172.20.12.1. Come back to the table. So if you notice it, oh, this is okay, this is within the range of second row. 170.16.0 to 0.0 172.31.255. So it means it also a private IP address. So if you come to third one, it's 13, it's started 13. So come back to the my table. So you can't see any IP address within range of 13. So it means that this is not a private IP address, this is a public IP address. So if you come to fourth one, it's also a public IP address because there is no any IP address, any private IP address for 123 range. Okay, I will repeat same again. It means anyone around the world can use any block from these private IP blocks. It means that any organization, let's say there are two organization A and B, they can use same private IP block. So that's the simple idea, because these blocks are not open to the internet, so that's not a problem. So if you come to internet, you have to use a public IP address. But if company A uses one of a public IP address, any other company within the world unable to use, and they can't use same public IP address, because they are going to read the public, they are going to read the internet using that public IP address. Okay, because these IPs are only visible within their own network and not usable in public network. It's about private IP address. If you need to work with internet, your private network computer must have a public IP address. Router, a firewall does that job, and it can net private IPs to public IP address. Okay, let's come to this diagram. So here, computers has private IP address 192.168.0.143, then comes to router. So then when data reached internet, it gives a public IP address like 145. So if you notice this, this is not within any of these ranges. So it means 145.12.14.6 is a public IP address. Okay, guys. Yes. Now let's see how to find my computer private IP address. I'm not going to show live here. So because my service provider you will notify my service provider. Okay, that's not a problem. I will have added screen capture. Please open your control panel and go to the network and internet and open network and sharing center and click on your Wi-Fi connection. So I have put a mark and click here. So if you click on your Wi-Fi, then you can have this kind of a view. So then press details. So now you can see your computer private IP address, IPv4 address 192.168.8.199. So this is within the private IP ranges. It means this is a private IP address. Then you can see your subnet mask. So don't worry guys, I have not talked about the private subnet mask. I will talk about it in the future videos. So then you can see a default gateway. So this should be the your router my router IP, because default gateway means my gate. So when I reach if I reach the facebook.com, first my data should read the my router. So it's my gateway. So it means this is router IP. Okay. So then how to look my public IP address? Guys, as I mentioned earlier, so any private IP address, if any private network devices trying to read the internet, it means my computer is trying to read the internet, my private IP should be net to a public IP address. It means that after the router, my router my internet service provider should allocate a public IP address for my device. So that's what meant by public IP address. So it means that if we reach internet, we will have a public IP address. So how to find that public IP address? I will teach you how to find it. Please open your browser and type what is my IP address. Then it will suggest few websites to see your public IP address. Go to the top one. So then you can have this kind of view. So you can see what is my IP address 175.157.43.149. So it's a public IP address. If you come to this table, you can't see that IP within these ranges. It means that's a public IP address. Okay, guys. So please try this. Then you will see your public IP address, and please note that that IP address not within your configurations like your private network configuration, private IP address configuration, because this IP address is provided by internet service provider, which is this will be provided by router. So when you read the internet, so that's how you can see your public IP address. And also here you can see my IP address location also, and also you can see ISP, but I have hide it here. So guys, try this and find your IP address, your public IP address. It means that when you read the internet, you will have a public IP address, because you can't read the internet without any public IP address. You must have a public IP address. And also note that any organization can use same private IP address flow, because private IP address are not open to the internet. And if any organization read the internet, they must have a public IP address, and two organization can't have same public IP address, because it is these public IP addresses are provided by special organizations. So I will talk about them. So then, if any organization have one of a public IP address, any other organization can't have same public IP address. So I will talk about them in future videos. So I think you understood what is meant by private IP address and public IP address. And also, guys, thanks for watching my video. And also one thing to show you. Give me a second. Okay. I will search for CMD, then I will press enter, then I will type command ipconfig. Okay, this will show my IP configuration details. I think I show you guys so how to see these details using control panel network sharing. So but here from the command line you can see same. Here when I press enter IP config, you can see wireless LAN adapter Wi-Fi. Also you can see my IP address 192.168.8.199 and subnet mask and default gateway. This is router IP address. So if any other device connected with my router, so it will get any IP address within same range. It means it will take IP address like 192.168.8.200. So that kind of IP address it will take, because my subnet mask is 255.255.255. So don't worry about subnet mask. I will talk about them in future videos. Okay guys, thank you for watching my video, and also please subscribe my channel and also watch my other video series and share these videos with your friends. And if you have any problem, please comment on comment section. And if you need to clarify something, please contact me, and all my contact details are in description. So thank you very much.